Section 19 of Villette by Charlotte Brontë. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Fortune. Section 19. A thing there was which puzzled myself, and I sought in my brain a key to that riddle almost as sedulously as Madame had sought a guide to useful knowledge in my toilet drawers. How was it that Dr. John, if he had not been accessory to the dropping of that casket into the garden, should have known that it was dropped, and appeared so promptly on the spot to seek it? So strong was the wish to clear up this point that I began to entertain this daring suggestion. Why may I not, in case I should ever have the opportunity, ask Dr. John himself to explain this coincidence? And so long as Dr. John was absent, I really believed I had courage to test him with such a question. Little Georgette was now convalescent, and her physician accordingly made his visits very rare. Indeed, he would have ceased them altogether, had not Madame insisted on his giving an occasional call till the child should be quite well. She came into the nursery one evening, just after I had listened to Georgette's lisped and broken prayer, and had put her to bed. Taking the little one's hand, she said, "Cet enfant a toujours un peu de fièvre," and presently afterwards, looking at me with a quicker glance than was habitual to her quiet eye, "Le Docteur John l'a-t-il vu dernièrement? Non, n'est-ce pas?" Of course, she knew this better than any other person in the house. "Well," she continued, "I am going out, pour faire quelques courses en fiacre. I shall call on Dr. John, and send him to the child. I will that he sees her this evening. Her cheeks are flushed, her pulse is quick. You will receive him. For my part, I shall be from home." Now the child was well enough, only warm with the warmth of July, it was scarcely less needful to send for a priest to administer extreme unction than for a doctor to prescribe a dose. Also, Madame rarely made courses, as she called them, in the evening. Moreover, this was the first time she had chosen to absent herself on the occasion of a visit from Dr. John. The whole arrangement indicated some plan. This I saw, but without the least anxiety. "Ha, ha, Madame!" laughed Light-heart the beggar, "your crafty wits are on the wrong tack." She departed, attired very smartly, in a shawl of price, and a certain chapeau vert tendre, hazardous as to its tint for any complexion less fresh than her own, but to her not unbecoming. I wondered what she intended, whether she really would send Dr. John or not, or whether indeed he would come. He might be engaged. Madame had charged me not to let Georgette sleep till the doctor came. I had therefore sufficient occupation in telling her nursery tales and palavering the little language for her benefit. I affected Georgette. She was a sensitive and a loving child. To hold her in my lap, or carry her in my arms, was to me a treat. To-night she would have me lay my head on the pillow of her crib. She even put her little arms round my neck. Her clasp, and the nestling action with which she pressed her cheek to mine, made me almost cry with a tender pain. Feeling of no kind abounded in that house. This pure little drop from a pure little source was too sweet. It penetrated deep, and subdued the heart, and sent a gush to the eyes. Half an hour or an hour passed. Georgette murmured in her soft lisp that she was growing sleepy. And you shall sleep, thought I, malgré maman and médecine, if they are not here in 10 minutes. Hark! There was the ring, and there the tread, astonishing the staircase by the fleetness with which it left the steps behind. Rosine introduced Dr. John, and with a freedom of manner not altogether peculiar to herself, but characteristic of the domestics of Villette generally, she stayed to hear what he had to say. Madame's presence would have awed her back to her own realm of the vestibule and the cabinet. For mine, or that of any other teacher or pupil, she cared not a jot. Smart, trim, and pert she stood, a hand in each pocket of her gay grisette apron, eyeing Dr. John with no more fear or shyness than if he had been a picture instead of a living gentleman. "Le marmot n'a rien, n'est-ce pas?" said she, indicating Georgette with a jerk of her chin. "Pas beaucoup," was the answer, as the doctor hastily scribbled with his pencil some harmless prescription. "Eh bien," pursued Rosine, approaching him quite near, while he put up his pencil. "And the box? Did you get it? Monsieur went off like a coup de vent the other night. I had not time to ask him. I found it, yes." "And who threw it, then?" continued Rosine, speaking quite freely the very words I should so much have wished to say, but had no address or courage to bring it out. How short some people make the road to a point which, for others, seems unattainable! "That may be my secret," rejoined Dr. John briefly, but with no sort of hauteur. He seemed quite to understand the Rosine or grisette character. "Mais enfin," continued she, nothing abashed, "Monsieur knew it was thrown, since he came to seek it. How did he know?" "I was attending a little patient in the college near," said he, "and saw it dropped out of his chamber window, and so came to pick it up." How simple the whole explanation! The note had alluded to a physician as then examining Gustave. "Ah ca!" pursued Rosine. "Il n'y a donc rien là-dessous. Pas de mystère, pas d'amourette, par exemple?" "Pas plus que sur ma main," responded the doctor, showing his palm. "Quel dommage!" responded the grisette. "Et moi, à qui tout cela commençait à donner des idées?" "Vraiment, vous en êtes pour vos frais," was the doctor's cool rejoinder. She pouted. The doctor could not help laughing at the sort of moue she made. When he laughed, he had something peculiarly good-natured and genial in his look. I saw his hand inclined to his pocket. "How many times have you opened the door for me within this last month?" he asked. "Monsieur ought to have kept count of that," said Rosine, quite readily. "As if I had not something better to do," rejoined he. But I saw him give her a piece of gold, which she took unscrupulously, and then danced off to answer the door-bell, ringing just now every 5 minutes, as the various servants came to fetch the half-boarders. The reader must not think too hardly of Rosine. On the whole, she was not a bad sort of person, and had no idea there could be any disgrace in grasping at whatever she could get, or any effrontery in chattering like a pie to the best gentleman in Christendom. I had learnt something from the above scene, besides what concerned the ivory box, viz., that not on the robe de jaconet, pink or grey, nor yet on the frilled and pocketed apron, lay the blame of breaking Dr. John's heart. These items of array were obviously guiltless as Georgette's little blue tunic. So much the better. But who then was the culprit? What was the ground, what was the origin, what the perfect explanation of the whole business? Some points had been cleared, but how many yet remained obscure as night? However, I said to myself, it is no affair of yours. and turning from the face on which I had been unconsciously dwelling with a questioning gaze, I looked through the window which commanded the garden below. Dr. John, meantime, standing by the bedside, was slowly drawing on his gloves and watching his little patient as her eyes closed and her rosy lips parted in coming sleep. I waited till he should depart as usual, with a quick bow and scarce articulate good night. Just as he took his hat, my eyes, fixed on the tall houses bounding the garden, saw the one lattice, already commemorated, cautiously open. Forth from the aperture projected a hand and a white handkerchief. Both waved. I know not whether the signal was answered from some viewless quarter of our own dwelling, that immediately after there fluttered from the lattice a falling object, white and light. Villette the second, of course. "There!" I ejaculated involuntarily. "Where?" asked Dr. John with energy, making direct for the window. "What is it?" "They have gone and done it again," was my reply. A handkerchief waved and something fell, and I pointed to the lattice, now closed and looking hypocritically blank. "Go at once, pick it up and bring it here," was his prompt direction, adding, "Nobody will take notice of you. I should be seen." Straight I went. After some little search, I found a folded paper, lodged on the lower branch of a shrub. I seized and brought it direct to Dr. John. This time, I believe, not even Rosine saw me. He instantly tore the billet into small pieces without reading it. "It is not in the least her fault, you must remember," he said, looking at me. "Whose fault?" I asked. "Who is it? You don't yet know, then?" "Not in the least." "Have you no guess?" "None. If I knew you better, I might be tempted to risk some confidence, and thus secure you as guardian over a most innocent and excellent, but somewhat inexperienced being." "As a duenna?" I asked. "Yes," said he, abstractedly. "What snares are round her!" he added musingly. And now, certainly for the first time, he examined my face, anxious, doubtless, to see if any kindly expression there would warrant him in recommending to my care and indulgence some ethereal creature against whom powers of darkness were plotting. I felt no particular vocation to undertake the surveillance of ethereal creatures, but recalling the scene at the bureau, it seemed to me that I owed him a good turn. If I could help him, then I would, and it lay not with me to decide how. With as little reluctance as might be, I intimated that I was willing to do what I could towards taking care of any person in whom he might be interested. "I am no farther interested than as a spectator," said he, with a modesty admirable, as I thought, to witness. I happen to be acquainted with the rather worthless character of the person who, from the house opposite, has now twice invaded the sanctity of this place. I have also met in society the object at whom these vulgar attempts are aimed. Her exquisite superiority and innate refinement ought, one would think, to scare impertinence from her very idea. It is not so, however, and innocent, unsuspicious as she is, I would guard her from evil if I could. In person, however, I can do nothing. I cannot come near her." He paused. "Well, I am willing to help you," said I. "Only tell me how." And busily, in my own mind, I ran over the list of our inmates, seeking this paragon, this pearl of great price, this gem without flaw. It must be Madame, I concluded. She only, amongst us all, has the art even to seem superior. But as to being unsuspicious, inexperienced, etc., Dr. John need not distract himself about that. However, this is just his whim, and I will not contradict him. He shall be humoured. His angel shall be an angel. Just notify the quarter to which my care is to be directed, I continued gravely, chuckling, however, to myself over the thought of being set to chaperon Madame Beck or any of her pupils. Now Dr. John had a fine set of nerves, and he at once felt by instinct what no more coarsely constituted mind would have detected, namely, that I was a little amused at him. The colour rose to his cheek. With half a smile he turned and took his hat. He was going. My heart smote me. I will help you, said I eagerly. I will do what you wish. I will watch over your angel. I will take care of her. Only tell me who she is. But you must know, said he then with earnestness, yet speaking very low. So spotless, so good, so unspeakably beautiful, impossible that one house should contain two like her. I allude, of course. Here the latch of Madame Beck's chamber door, opening into the nursery, gave a sudden click, as if the hand holding it had been slightly convulsed. There was the suppressed explosion of an irrepressible sneeze. These little accidents will happen to the best of us. Madame, excellent woman, was then on duty. She had come home quietly, stolen upstairs on tiptoe. She was in her chamber. If she had not sneezed, she would have heard all, and so should I. But that unlucky sternutation routed Dr. John. While he stood aghast, she came forward, alert, composed, in the best yet most tranquil spirits. No novice to her habits but would have thought she had just come in, and scouted the idea of her ear having been glued to the keyhole for at least 10 minutes. She affected to sneeze again, declared she was enrhumée, and then proceeded volubly to recount her course en fiacre. The prayer bell rang, and I left her with the doctor. End of section 19. Recording by Leanne Fortune.